Tom, buen día.
Okay, so good morning everyone and welcome to FHAR, the Barcelona Housing and Rehabilitation Forum 22. Thank you for being with us today here, to those of you who are here in person and also those who are following us on our streaming from anywhere in this world. I am Nuria Moliner. I am an architect and a communicator, and I will be delighted to moderate this forum, because through my research and dissemination work, I have a special interest in housing from a social and environmental perspective. And I'm really excited to listen to your ideas and your proposals. As you all know, this is the third edition of FHAR. This is an initiative of the Barcelona Housing and Rehabilitation Institute, whose main goal is to bring together professionals from the private and public sectors to discuss, work and value the future of housing in the city. So we have 2 days ahead of us, which I'm sure will be very intense, very interesting, full of presentations and conferences by local and international speakers to reflect on a basic need, which unfortunately is also a challenge that affects us all. That is access to housing, affordable housing, and we'll be doing this from here where we are now, Palo Alto, Barcelona. It's an old factory from 1856 in the heart of Poblenou. Just over 20 years ago, it was turned into a foundation and a center for the creation of arts and culture, and that is how the actual factory was rehabilitated and maintained, and it's a new green lung open to the neighborhood. So we could say this project is also in line with the spirit of FHAR. Having said that, let's move into the topic. Real estate speculation and the expulsion of neighbors from their neighborhoods, the place where they belong, because of gentrification, is on the rise. This is increasing social inequalities, and we are living in a society that hasn't yet recovered from the impacts of the real estate bubble and the 2008 financial crisis. So it's raining on wet. The lack of public housing and the accumulative effect of the different social and economic crises make it more necessary than ever to have a public policy to guarantee the right to housing. So how could this global strategy to face up to speculation and gentrification look like to ensure the right to housing? It's easy to say it in words, but it's very difficult to actually implement this. So FHAR 2022 comes up with three main thematic blocks on which urgent action is needed. First, we need to increase the stock of affordable housing. This is a dream. It may seem impossible because cities do not have the ability to to build affordable housing, keeping up in pace with what society is asking for and with the pressure of the speculative real estate market. But cities will become less and less fair if we don't take action, if we don't offer much more affordable public housing to meet the needs, and unless we uh, move away from the way of doing things in the past. So we can maybe see some of the possible solutions. We're seeing them, like coming up with innovative constructive systems that make construction pace up and minimizes the environmental footstep of these buildings. I know that all of you are thinking of some of these projects. We've seen them in the city of Barcelona, and we want FHAR to be a space to share experiences, questions, criticisms, and also to come up with proposals. Secondly, FHAR 2022 will also serve to showcase different systems of regulating rent from different places in Europe, to discuss them and look at how we can use them to counter speculation and gentrification. As David Harvey says, our cities shouldn't be a place to invest. They need to be a place to live in. It's as simple as that. But the arrival of international investment funds that have purchased a large amount of housing in recent decades have led to an increase in rental prices, which continue to grow, and it is expelling population from the neighborhoods, and that is harming our cultural and social fabric, and it is doing away with our essence and identity. In this regard, just a few days ago, we had some very significant data. I don't know if you saw them on social media, but they're very representative and they're very striking. More than half of the rental properties in Barcelona for usual rent are in the hands of people or companies that in the city have more than 3 properties, and more than a third of rental property is in the hands of large real estate owners who own 10 apartments or flats or more. So this is the reality, and to respond to this reality and to the commodification of a basic right such as housing, thankfully we've come up with alternatives in terms of rent and public housing, such as cooperatives with cessation of use, and in Barcelona they're paving the way towards this new model. And in Barcelona, more concretely, these are only a few examples that haven't really had time to expand to society at large. Thankfully also, of course, we have big protest movements defending the right to housing and the right to the city. But it's fundamental that we come up with brave responses from all areas, from the administrations, politicians, researchers, town planning developers, and we all share a responsibility in this big challenge to make the right to housing a reality. And we can't forget this is an issue of rights, the right to housing, the right to decent housing, which is recognized in several instruments, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights or the International Covenant on Civil Political Rights. But the reality is very often different, especially among the more vulnerable groups and the youth. We feel very frustrated in a world where we cannot even afford to find a decent place to live in and to lead our lives in freedom. In a world where we see this social and environmental collapse, which is pushing us towards a very uncertain future. But we're here in FHAR 2022 to come up with proposals and to be positive, to come up with solutions to these social and environmental challenges, which, let's recall, are local and global, to imagine alternative future scenarios and to show that we can make these alternatives a reality. I am sure that many of these solutions will force us to rethink about the way we grow. Perhaps we don't need to grow that much, or we should degrow to put life and the planet in the center of all our actions and decisions. In fact, the third and last thematic axis for FHAR 2022 will have to do with applying environmental and social criteria to refurbishment. And this is a key fundamental aspect if we think of the environmental footprint of the construction sector. I think it's important to being sustainable is to give a longer life to what already exists, and rehabilitation is the present and the future of architecture, especially in consolidated Western cities like ours. Also, if we bear in mind how the housing stock in our cities is aging, so we'll link aspects related to refurbishment, and we will link them to the European Next Generation Recovery Funds. So that gives you an idea of what these 3 thematic blocks that are structuring the program of FHAR 22 look like. And somehow, through these 3 large thematic blocks, we want to come up with a global strategy to face up to speculation and gentrification. And let's hope that together we can all shape and make a reality of these concepts so that we get the right to housing to no longer be at risk and to become a reality. But to learn a lot more about the philosophy and behind and the goals of FHAR, I'll give the floor to Vanesa, Valiño, who is the head of the Barcelona City Council Department for Housing. Hi everyone. Well, first, as I'd like to thank Nuria Moliner for this introduction. You left me speechless, in fact. I am Vanesa Valiño, as you said. In the program, we had the City Councillor for Housing, and she unfortunately couldn't be here. She had a last-minute emergency and can't be with us, but she will be with us this afternoon. From the City Council of Barcelona, I'd like to welcome you to this third forum on housing and rehabilitation, which is of permanent support to meet, to share on housing. And one thing we saw when we reached the government in 2015 is that we were lacking a discussion on the type of housing policies we want for the City Council of Barcelona. Without spaces to reflect and meet and discuss, it's very difficult for the policies to be implemented as our citizens want. Each of these forums have had different thematic axes. I remember the first we carried out, which was focused on regulating rent. I think it was in 2016 or 2017, and back then we invited several European cities where rent was regulated to give us some orientation. In the last forum, it was focusing more on innovation strategies to grow our housing stock. And this forum today is back with one of the topics that it just adds on to the burden, and that is coming up with strategies against gentrification. Because contrary to what it may seem, gentrification can be avoided. We are not forced for cities to be gentrified. You can live in a city without cities becoming gentrified. You have to make streets nicer and peaceful without meaning that people living in the neighborhood should be pushed out of their homes. And that is why this is a central axis for these 2 days. We need to look at how we organize, how we develop policies to avoid gentrification, or in other words, how can we avoid those policies aiming at coming up with a better city, leading to the expulsion of people living in our neighborhoods. Nuria said this very rightly. There are 3 concrete axes. The first, and it could only be this way, is how can we increase the public housing stock in a rapid and sustainable way. There's a figure which has been published recently and which we have to recognize, and that is that the city of Barcelona is building more public housing than all of the Catalan regional government and the city of Madrid is doing. It's a huge effort, and this is the outcome of a strong political will, but also of a whole series of teams that are here today, and without them it would have been impossible. But it's also thanks to the collaboration of the private sector, from the sector of architecture and housing developers, who are doing all they can to increase the public stock, and how with, for instance, industrialized construction to make it more sustainable and quicker. And the other day, when they introduced the data of the Metropolitan Observatory for Housing, a huge public effort is being made to learn about the status of the situation. We were told that only 4% of rental in the city is public rental. So unless we promote public policies to intervene on this remaining 96% of the rental stock, would mean we would be abandoning all of these other people who need rent, and rent must be regulated to be able to do this. And refurbishment, I mean, we are in Barcelona. We don't have as much free land as we'd like to build new housing developments, and also because we have these European funds. These European funds have been conceived with a logic that maybe isn't the Mediterranean way of thinking. I mean that many of the countries where these funds for the rehabilitation of buildings is going to countries with stable rental prices, with prices, and rehabilitation here isn't endangering the people living in these places. There are countries where there's rent regulation. I'm thinking of Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, but here in Spain, as in most of Southern Europe, we do not have these stable rental frameworks, meaning that refurbishment policies and the arrival of so many European funds means that unless we are able to use this money in the best way, may lead to unwanted impacts, such as what in Europe is called renoviction, that is the expulsion of neighborhoods because of the improvement of the housing stock. And we will be talking about all of this during the next 2 days. Luckily, we have more than 250 people who registered for this third forum on housing and rehabilitation, and we want this to be a meeting spot and a place to get to know about initiatives. We've come up with a combination of theoretical sessions with people coming from outside the city and also from other countries, and you will be able to see this on the program. We will be hearing from experiences in Scotland, from Valencia and Cadiz, but we also wanted to give visibility to the efforts that are being made from the City Council of Barcelona to increase and improve housing policies. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have planned a visit to one of the flagship projects, a building that is made with shipping containers. We call it a prop. It's near Glorias. It's a building that is quite large and quite beautiful. I don't know if you've walked past it, but within the framework of this forum, you will also have the possibility to visit this building. We also have an exhibition on industrialized housing. It took us a great effort and a lot of tender love to learn about these new techniques, to look at how we could organize to do things better. And we have also planned a visit to other public housing that were granted awards, such as the housing units for young people in Can Fabra. And I think that's all. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you around here. Welcome to you all, and I hope you enjoy this conference. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming up with these aspects which we will be discussing over the course of these 2 days with FHAR 2022. Bearing these concepts in mind, now we could say that officially we can start off with FHAR, but before starting off with the first panel, and we are eager to hear the panelists, let me explain how the questions from the audience will be managed. We want everyone to be able to participate in the discussion and to ask questions, and for that we have created a program. On the program you will find a QR code that will take you to Menti, which is www.menti.com. There you can write your questions. Bear in mind that every panel will have a code which we will share on screen at the start of each session, so that when you go onto the web you can enter this code and ask your questions. And before we close the discussion, we will see the questions on screen and we will share them with the participants of each panel.